Alright, today is exciting because I finally get to install my EVGA CLC 280 closed loop cooler that I've had sitting for 6 months because my Corsair 300R case does not support cooler at the top, at least not a full 280 millimeter cooler without modifications. We're also going to use the Corsair RM1000X fully modular power supply. It is a 1000-watt power supply, and the reason for that is that in the future I intend to move on to an i9 or a Threadripper series of platform with the CPU, and they are pretty power hungry right now. Hopefully we'll see some improvements in power efficiency on those two platforms as they mature and move into this next stage. I know Ryzen Plus has been talked about recently, so we'll see what comes of that. Alright, since the majority of this upgrade is going to focus on better cooling for my CPU, we're going to go ahead and run a preliminary baseline of what the temperatures are going to hit using Prime 95. So in Prime 95 we're going to do a torture test, and we have three options: small FFTs, in place large FFTs, and blend test. Small FFTs are really quite excessive, and my workload doesn't get anywhere near that. In place large FFTs is pretty taxing on the CPU, but the first part of in place large FFTs is very similar to my workloads. The second portion is a little rougher. And then the blend test doesn't really tax the CPU too much, at least not this CPU, which is an i7 6700K. So we're going to go ahead and use in-place large FFTs and run this. And you can see that we pretty much immediately jump up to the high 60s, low 70s. And I'm going to let this run for 8 or 10 minutes, and then I will be back. Alright, so Prime 95 has been running for almost 10 minutes now, and it's gone through 2 passes, 3 in some case, of each test that it does. And as you can see here, we've maxed out 96 Celsius on Core 3, 94 on Core 2, 92 on Core 1, and 95 on Core 0. So those are pretty high temperatures, and hopefully they'll come down. As you can see, I do have it overclocked to 4.7 gigahertz, and the cache ratio is set to 45, so the cache is running at 4.5 gigahertz. The case right now, we don't have to worry too much about cable management and aesthetics, because the side does not have an acrylic or glass panel. With the 700D Airflow Edition, I'm sorry, 750D Airflow Edition, we will be dealing with power and other cable management issues. So it's nice that that has some other options beyond what we have here, which is a rat's nest. But it works, and there are fans pretty much everywhere there can be in this mid-tower case. I may use an extended ATX motherboard in the future, I don't know. But whatever I need to use, the 750D should handle it. So we're going to take this system, and obviously we're going to replace this cooler. So this is the CPU cooler I've been using on this build for the last 2 years. It is a Cooler Master 120 millimeter all-in-one liquid cooler, and then That's going to be replaced by the EVGA CLC 280 and the Smart 650 80 plus bronze. I think it's 80 plus bronze from Thermaltake power supply is going to be replaced by the Corsair 1000 watt. And other than that, everything will get swapped over. All right, now that everything is back together in the new case with the new 280 millimeter cooler, we're going to go ahead and run the same in-place large FFT Prime 95 torture test, and we will see what temperatures we reach. We were hitting 95 before. We're going to go ahead and run this with the old cooler, the old 120 millimeter cooler. We were initially jumping up into the 70s right away. It looks like we're jumping into the low 60s, mid 60s, and we'll see how this stabilizes. So I'm going to run this for about 10 minutes and we'll see where it ends up. Alright, so it's been about 10 minutes and all of these workers have gone through a minimum of 2 passes of each type of test that's done in the large FFTs. And if you look over here, we maxed out in the low to mid 80s, whereas with the 120 millimeter cooler that I was using in the 300R case, we were maxing out in the mid 90s and probably throttling at that point. I have seen, right now we're looking at 150 watt power draw. I did see 165 watts at max. So I could maybe push this up to 4.8 with the voltage still sitting around 1.3, 1.4. But we will see. I should note also that these temperatures were done, as well as the earlier tests, were done with an ambient temperature of 19 degrees Celsius. So for reference, they were both done at the same ambient temperature. And like I said, we're getting about 10 degrees or a little over 10 degrees cooler. So that's definitely a huge improvement. Alright, and finally, before I start trying to push the overclock any higher than 4.7 gigahertz on the core and 4.5 gigahertz on the cache ratio, I'm going to do a run here in Cinebench R15. I did this run right here, 1000 was the point, the score on that just before I started this video. Started putting this video together. So with the same settings, let's just go ahead and see if we get any better performance with the temperature staying lower. Alright, so we got an extra 3 points out of that, which is within margin of error. This 999, 997, 995, 995, those were all at the same settings as well. So 1003, that's within margin of error. That means Cinebench is not really pushing those cores all that hard, not getting the temperature up there. So we'll go ahead and take a look and see if we can push a higher overclock now. Alright, so I'm done pushing the overclock, and I was able to get up to 4.8 gigahertz, but I had to reduce the cache ratio down to 43, so it's 4.3 gigahertz on the cache. At 4.5 gigahertz, it was crashing on the cache with a 4.8 gigahertz on the core. At 4.4, it actually got a slightly lower score than this. So it looks like we're going to max out with this particular board, with this chip, with this cooling solution at 1022 score on Cinebench R15. But that's a pretty decent jump, 22 points from the 1000 that we had prior. And it should be a little more speed and productivity when I'm rendering for video or still images. So anyway, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video and it was informative to you. If you liked it, please hit the like button. Consider subscribing for more content. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you at the next one.